Today on Marketing Smarts, I've invited Jill Foster to talk with us about networking and how you can use events and conferences to establish and build business relationships. If you like what you hear today, be sure and register for the B2B Marketing Forum in October because Jill will be a keynote speaker. When you do, use the promo code SMART to save $100. Founder and blogger at Live Your Talk, Jill Foster helps people develop distinct message and voice as public speakers. She works with award-winning entrepreneurs, CEOs, and innovators living their talk on stages from TED and TEDx, Ignite venues, to keynotes around the globe. A TEDx storyteller herself and social technology advocate, her work has been in conversation in the Washington Post, Huffington Post, Guardian UK, Washingtonian Magazine, and a range of other media outlets. We're pleased to have her with us today. Jill, thank you for joining us.
It's so great to be here. Thank you for having me. And who can beat the B2B Forum adrenaline? It's great.
Oh, it's incredible. So Jill, networking is kind of a dirty word. I know a lot of people associate it with, sales or somebody wanting something from them. So what's a way that you can strike a balance and just talk to people when you approach them as opposed to networking or being salesy?
Carrie, you bring up a great point about that salesy type of attitude to avoid, and it regularly comes up. That type of question regularly comes up, and there are two thoughts that come to mind. One is to remember as much as able that listening is the name of the game when it comes to starting a new networking relationship or a new conversation, in that type of networking forum. And then secondly, and there are a lot of different ways to do this, but if we can remember as much as able to put ourselves into a listening position as soon as possible, to let the other person in the conversation reveal their greatest challenges or their greatest stories that they love to champion. So for instance, if you and I were starting a new conversation, we were first meeting at the B2B Forum, I would be really interested in starting a conversation and putting myself, therefore, in a listening position as soon as possible and ask you, hey, Carrie, what is the most favorite thing you've accomplished today? Make it specific, and then just let it roll, and then let you share whatever comes to your mind.
So, do you listen or do you wait to talk?
Ooh. Spark conversation with a question as much as able, and then discipline yourself to listen. There's something that you just brought to mind. Whenever you were saying that salesy attitude is a popular attitude to try and avoid, in the same vein, wanting to share ideas and talk can be something that is also something to avoid. I think it's really important to, again, really assert in our minds as networkers that trust often starts when we really demonstrate a capacity to listen and to do that, to listen and to learn. And to do that starts with, by golly, really throwing out one or two specific questions to the individual before you.
So, Jill, what's the most embarrassing networking story for you? I mean, if you want to pretend that it happened to someone else, that's okay.
You know what? No, it's a chance to be honest, isn't it? I guess we should be honest. If we're going to forge trust, speaking of trust between us, right? I should be honest. You know what? It was a while ago. Twitter was still reasonably young, and I was at an offline networking event, in DC, and someone approached, and I thought they were going to start conversation, and I didn't recognize their face, and I was looking forward to it, and they immediately said, "You don't follow me on Twitter." And they had those pregnant pauses, spliced in between each word. And so there was that lovely, awkward pause on my end, and frankly, the embarrassing part was good old, conversational cluelessness. I wasn't sure how to respond, but I did assert a smile and look them in the face, and I said, you know what? You caught me being super duper imperfect And I look forward to conversations on Twitter and off. How's your day?
Although, in fairness, I mean, maybe you didn't want to follow them on Twitter, or maybe it was an oversight. So that's kind of an odd way to start, don't you think?
You know what? It is. From a networking capacity,
Um,
you know what?
a lot in a related question, what's a networking worst practice? I mean, I know people who get really upset if you take their email off their business card and then use it to subscribe them to your e-newsletter. Are there other worst networking practices?
Do you know what? In this day and age when social conversation and social content are so incredibly, prolific, I would say, Carrie, we've reached an era where the number one faux pas is assuming that a business card, period, is the ultimate form of contact when meeting someone new. And I just don't think it is. I've seen people at networking events completely, utterly interrupt conversations that were, immersed conversation. Pretend you and I were offline, one-on-one. They were immersed conversations, and people would interrupt to give either the other person in the conversation or myself a business card. I mean, it was shove, 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 shove. And even though it sounds quirky to share that type of story, it may sound, foreign or odd, it does happen. That type of indulgence and awkwardness happens. And so I would say the number one faux pas is, certainly what you just described regarding, absconding email addresses from business cards. But also, let's take it one step further and realize in this networking era that we're in our hyper-social climate, the business card is not the reliable or ultimately trusted first point of contact. The first point of contact is really substantive, attentive conversation where you create a gateway to continue conversation through different networks online as well.
You mentioned being really immersed in conversation. I know that sometimes people are introverted by nature, and they go to a networking event like this and they just want to sort of stare at their smartphone. So what is a good way for them to engage in conversation with people who are already talking without sort of disrupting things?
Sure. No, that's a really, really good one. I really advocate, especially with folks with more of an introverted, nature, I really advocate them to focus on one person and one question. And let's say that there are just lots of different conversation clusters of people going on, and so it's that type of dynamic where that introverted individual needs to gently break into a conversation. Just in that moment, I really suggest them choosing one cluster of people and to look someone in the face and say, could I join you? And then let conversation roll from there.
Smartphones, are they good for networking or terrible for networking? Because I know I have a tendency, if I'm feeling shy, to just text or something during one of these networking events. What do you think about smartphones generally and the role they play?
Do you know what? Frankly, I used to really want to hide from that awkward social adrenaline and really sink into my smartphone and hide in the corner. I'm now at a point, frankly, where I think the smartphone is something to hide behind, and you want to transcend that and get over that. But there's also a really, I think, compelling way that the creative content capacity of our phones can be a part of enriching initial conversations in a networking dynamic. Here's an example. What's coming to mind is the neat book that Anne Hanley, the great champion of marketing props, wrote, Content Rules, and she regularly advocates, you've probably heard this plenty of times, she regularly advocates, are you looking for content moments everywhere? She suggests that people regularly be asking those types of content questions. And so in the spirit of, quote, are you looking for content moments everywhere, with the smartphone and networking opportunities in mind, I suggest, look, are we looking for ways to help share the conversation occurring before us, in a tasteful way. So, example, if you and I were having a conversation and you divulge, a fantastic project that you're really jazzed about, that is an opportunity just to be open to ask. Just be open to ask. That's an opportunity to say, for me to say, hey, Carrie, thanks for sharing your awesome project. Could I share that with others online and open up a door to do maybe a 1-minute impromptu audio cast with different audio apps like Audioboo, or do a 1-minute casual, conversant video, literally simple video snippet. So not only can you honor the conversation before you, but take the gem that just occurred and share it and hopefully expand the accesses of resources to the people before you. Sometimes that doesn't work, but sometimes, especially if there's just an openness to make that ask, quote, can I make this conversation even more shareable? Interesting things can happen if even we're just willing to ask.
This is Ann Handley, Chief Content Officer of Marketing Pros, here to tell you that today's Marketing Smarts is sponsored by the Marketing Pros B2B Forum, taking place this October 9th through the 11th in Boston. Well, honestly, we're not actually sponsoring the podcast. We pretty much made that up as an excuse to talk to you. Yes, you, the informed marketer. You see, you are our ideal attendee, and here's why. First, you're smarter and more motivated than the average marketer. I know this because you're listening to a podcast about marketing in your downtime. With 42 sessions, interactive discussions, 4 inspiring keynotes, and many opportunities for one-on-one advice that we call marketing therapy, we're confident the B2B Forum has exactly the smarts you need without a bunch of sales pitch filler. From networking to storytelling to strategy, we think our lineup is pretty special and distinctively us. Second, because I want to meet you in person. Selfish? Maybe, but you're the reason why we do what we do, and I'd like to shake your hand and thank you for coming. So please join me and other smart marketers in my hometown of Boston this October 9th through the 11th. And because friends don't let friends pay full price, use code SMART, that's S-M-A-R-T, for $100 off the ticket price at mprofs.com/B2B-SMART. I hope to see you there.
One of the things that I have trouble with is ending a conversation. Can you recommend ways that you could graciously leave a conversation when it's come to its natural conclusion?
That's interesting, because there is such a thing as conversations coming to a natural conclusion, and then there are times when they keep going and going, and maybe the other person is dominating the conversation. But directly to your query, sometimes that awkward pause when a conversation concludes can be, noticeably strange. Just assert it and say, it's been a pleasure. I need to head out. How can I stay in contact? If that's authentic, if staying in contact is authentic to say, then say that phrase. But at least say, hey, thanks a lot for your time. Assert the pause and then head out.
Or just head out.
Are you saying that to me? Or
No, not at all. What's your best tip for successfully networking at a multi-day conference? I know some people find that kind of overwhelming.
Sure. There's so much energy and adrenaline going on regarding ideas and certainly, forging new relationships. It's a big, relational hoo-ha. In terms of a multi-day event, I highly suggest consciously factoring in energy preservation and, frankly, some quiet time. Like, let's say a session ends in a content marketing track at B2B Forum before going into the next session, or maybe the networking luncheon as example. Assert 3 or 4 alone minutes and just don't even check the phone, just literally have some quiet time, do a little bit of Zen breathing, and move on in. And I know, time can be precious, and these types of conscious energy preservation decisions can be hard to make, or seemingly hard to make. But establishing substantive conversation and relationships take time and energy, and it's an energy preservation game. And that's the number one thing I suggest, is to incorporate conscious, quiet minutes, 1 or 2 minutes in between conversations and networking events.
When is the best time to reconnect with someone that you've met at an event? I know when in the dating context, at least it used to be 3 days, you should wait 3 days before you call. So what is it in the business networking context? How soon is too soon to call and how late is too late?
Wow, what a great tactical question. My number one guide, frankly, is resonance. If you had a really strong conversation, by golly, say thank you either through an email or LinkedIn or your social network of choice as soon as possible. By golly, some friends and I say that a lot. By golly, show appreciation for that resonance as soon as possible. In terms of a more blanket tactic, I certainly wouldn't wait more than 48 hours to reconnect with people that you really had, one-on-one good conversation with.
So why do B2B marketers need their own networking event?
There's nothing like the power of immersion, especially immersion in different strategic and creative choices. I love, Carrie, your theme this year, choosing, the power of choice when it comes to effective marketing and B2B marketing. With that context in mind, I think just having immersed continuity of ideas and access to those different strategic ideas and content ideas that can really elevate marketing to the next level is just key. Continuity of ideas and immersion. Great. That's why.
What are some tips to help attendees make the most of the unique networking opportunity that the B2B Marketing Forum represents?
2 things for sure. One, and I can't say this enough, it can be so exciting, especially that it's being in Boston, to want to go at Mach 10, and to cram all types of conversations in as much as possible. The number one thing I suggest is to really assert energy preservation when looking at and planning all the conversations that you want to partake in at the B2B Forum. So literally, again, if you can incorporate 1 or 2 minutes of alone time in the corner before going into the next session, before starting the next conversation, or before going into that networking reception, take that time, because the more energy we have preserved, the more attentive, and oftentimes I find authentic, we will come across to the new people that we're meeting. Secondly, in terms of taking advantage, one thing I really highly suggest folks being cognizant of is to regularly be asking, what if? And by that I mean to adopt a mindset of, what if a particular idea, whether it's in your business or a particular hobby that you're working on that you want to share with someone that you're in conversation with, what if a certain idea can work? I find that sometimes well-meaning conversations, Carrie, can be a fruitful exchange, but in the desire to share, and listen, being conscious of challenging ideas that we have or that the other person can have in conversation, challenging in a good way, is often lost. So, for instance, if you were to say, or be sharing, about a neat project that you were working on, and let's say you shared that you really liked this said project, assert the what if mindset. I'm saying for myself right then, assert a little curiosity and say, why do you happen to really like that project? So asserting curiosity as much as a willingness to listen, plus preserving energy, I think, are things to really help capitalize on the opportunity. Excuse me, I had a brain blip.
So, Jill, apropos of nothing, what are some things that cupcakes and good networking have in common?
Mm, glorious question about the cupcake. Learning about people takes time, certainly, but it's a matter of removing layers through conversation. And by golly, let's work with the layer metaphor when it comes to cupcakes. That's, I love your question, and that's the first thing that came to mind is, different conversations, including different people in those conversations, extending conversations that you're having in person and translating them
That's really good.
offline, and expanding, not genericizing, but expanding where appropriate the way important conversations can take place. I think is the ball game, and that can take some layered amounts of time, patience, curiosity, and by golly, that's the cupcake metaphor that I'm going with. Layers of icing, layers of cake, layers of flavor equal layers of networking, opportunity, and conversation. How forced is that?
Well, Jill, unfortunately, that's all the time we have, but I've really enjoyed this conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us, and I look forward to seeing you at the B2B Marketing Forum.
Oh, I can't wait. Thanks for your great questions and your conversation. And until we meet again at B2B.
Jill will give a keynote presentation at the B2B Marketing Forum in October in Boston. In the meantime, follow her on Twitter at Jill Foster or find her on her website, liveyourtalk.com.